everyone, and welcome to our video tutorial for this oversized button-up cat neck warmer. So I hope you enjoy it. Please like, share and subscribe, and we hope to see you soon. Thanks. Bye. Okay, so to make this oversized cat neck warmer, you'll need some chunky yarn, and that's only if you want the chunky oversized look that I'm going for. You could certainly use any type of yarn for this neck warmer, and it would just be a finer look, and that's absolutely fine. I've just kind of, this pattern is meant for a chunkier sort of look. So this one here is about a 25% wool and acrylic, 75% blend. It's be about a 6 weight, and nice and chunky for this sort of project. You'll need a crochet hook to correspond to your yarn, and I'm using a 5mm. You'll need some scissors to snip your ends, a darning needle to weave in your ends, and a large button is recommended. Now you could definitely use a smaller button. I tend to use the larger buttons, because I like how they look and it goes well with this chunky sort of look, but also I want to reduce any potential choking hazards. So if that's not a concern of yours, then you can definitely use a smaller button. I've got this one here. It's be a 3cm across, 3cm diameter, and it's got these nice large holes. And just bear in mind you might need a sewing needle that will fit through your buttonholes. And then a tape measure to have a measurement for your cat's neck circumference. It's not vital that you have the exact circumference for this pattern, depending on how you want it to fit. If you want it to fit, really snugly, then it's a good idea to have that measurement. Otherwise, I'll include in the description box below a guide to general, sort of standard cat sizes. But always having the measurement of your cat, or having your cat with you, is even better. But having a measurement is always useful. Okay, so the stitches and techniques that you'll need to know to make this scarf are how to slip knot onto your hook, how to make a chain, how to half double crochet in the back loop only, and that's for this main central scarf area or neck warmer area. If you want to add this scalloped edge, and it's only optional, you don't have to, you'll need to know how to double crochet and how to slip stitch. Oh, and there's a border of single crochet before we start that scalloped border. So, all just basic crochet techniques. From there, sewing on a button and weaving in your ends. And this is it's quite a nice quick project. It's definitely accessible for beginners. So let's get started. Okay, so get started by making a slip knot onto your hook, however you're doing that. And then you're going to make a chain. Now, the chain is potentially the most tricky part of this project. So you want to take into account your cat's neck circumference plus how you want this to fit. Now, if you've got your cat with you, that's going to be ideal. But you want to accommodate your cat's neck circumference, and I'm actually making this for another cat, a bit larger than Melba. So her neck circumference is 30cm, and I want this to not fit, tightly around the neck. I want it to sort of sit down at the chest a little bit. And especially considering it's oversized, you don't want it too close to the neck, because it's just going to, too close under the chin, because it's just going to, restrict the movement of the head. So I've got 30cm to accommodate for her neck circumference, and then I'm going to allow about sort of 12 to 15 centimeters extra. Now that's so it will fit well, and also because your chain always tends to shrink as you crochet the stitches into it. So it's hard for me to give you an exact amount. If you've got your cat with you, once you've done your chain, check it on your cat and make sure it's fitting a little bit bigger than how you want it to fit, just to accommodate that shrinkage that will happen. So I'm going to go for that 30 centimeters, and then I think I'll add, it'll be at least 12 centimeters on top of that. Okay, so yeah, the sort of general general rule would be minimum 10 centimeters for this neck warmer, up to, you know, if you want it to fit really, really loosely, then up around and, you know, really make a V on the chest, then, you know, you could add up to 20 centimeters. There's really no rules with this. It all depends on your cat, the size, where you know, how you want it to sit and fit. So I'm going to go ahead and do at least 42 centimeters for my chain, and I might even go even just a little bit more. You know, I would rather it was slightly too big than too small. So I'll go ahead and complete my chain, and you do the same, and I'll meet you shortly. Okay, so I've got my chain length there that I want, and it's fallen just over 42 centimeters. So now you'll chain 1 as a turning chain, and then locate that second chain from the hook. Now I'm going to give you 2 options here. You can just work your half double crochets into the front of the chain, so into the, you know, just into the front of the chain as normal, or you can turn your chain over, so this is the V's at the front, turn it over to the back, and you've got these little third loops at the back here, and you can work into those. Now I'm going to work into these third loops just because I want my scarf to be, you know, kind of uniform all around. So when you do that, when you work into those third loops, it looks like the front looks kind of like a stitch. Okay, so I'm gonna do that just to give this what I think is just a slightly neater look. It, you know, because we're adding the border, it doesn't matter too much if you want to just work more easily into the front of your chain. Okay, so yarn over, and we're going to place half double crochets in each chain, starting from the second chain from the hook. So yarn over, pull through, 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through all 3. So that's a US half double crochet. So you're going to place 1 of those in each of your chains all the way to the end. And at the end of this row, I would recommend, if your cat's with you, you would just check this on your cat. So just allowing for it to sit with a button. So you would just take your chain in your first row and just check that it wraps, you know, and fits kind of where you want it to fit. Okay, just keep checking the sizing as you go. So go ahead, complete your row 1, and I'll meet you at the end. Okay, so there's row 1 done. Now, just to give you an idea, mine has shrunk by 2 centimeters. Okay, so it's gone down to 40 centimeters. Okay, so we're moving on to row 2, and this is where we're going to create our buttonhole. So chain 1 and turn your work. And in those first 2 stitches, place 2 half double crochet. So, one half double crochet in each of those first 2 stitches. So then we're going to create the buttonhole. Now it'll depend on the size of your button. For me, I'm going to chain 2 and skip 2, and then place a half double crochet in that third stitch, and then I'm just going to see how it goes for my button. So I'll just make sure that my button fits through, and it does. It fits through nicely. So you want it to be, you know, relatively, you know, snug fit for your button, but that you can definitely get it through. So that's going to work for me. Now you can chain and skip any number depending on the size of your button, okay? And the size of your yarn and your hook, of course. Okay, so from here, so we've created our buttonhole. From here, we're going to just work into the back loop only, up until the last stitch where we'll work back into both loops. Okay, so to work into the back loop, just check your stitch here. You've got, you know, you've got the V of the stitch, and you're just going to work into that back loop. Just doing half double crochets into the back loop only. And that's just going to give us a little bit of a ribbed effect, which always looks nice in these chunky knits. So go ahead and finish off row 2 all the way to the end. At the end, I'll meet you here. We're just going to, like I said, place, so you just make sure that you don't skip that last stitch, and place your stitch through both loops in the last stitch, and that just gives the edges a little bit more structure. So I'm going to finish row 2 and I'll meet you there. Okay, so I'm just placing my last 2 stitches here, so the first one in the back loop only, and then placing my last stitch through both loops. Okay, so that's row 2 done. Now we've just got one more row of this central area, so chain 1 and turn. And place your half double crochet through both loops in that first stitch. And then in back loop only for each stitch. Now you'll eventually come to your chain here, so you'll just work into the top loop of the chains as well, and then same thing, you'll work your last stitch into both loops. So just continue with row 3 and I'll meet you at the end. So just one half double crochet in each stitch, back loop only, to the chain, over the chain, and then into the last stitch. Okay, and I'm just working my last stitch into both loops of that stitch, and there's the first part of our scarf finished. So at this point, once again, you can just check it on your cat and make sure that it's sitting where you want it to sit. Now we're going to move on and make a single crochet border. Okay, so what you'll do here is chain 1 and insert a stitch back into that last stitch. Okay, so a single crochet into that last stitch, and then we're going to work just evenly spaced single crochets down this short edge. Now try not to create big holes if you can. Let's see where I can get that one. Yeah, try not to create big holes, but just place your stitches evenly spaced down that side. Now that one's gone a bit too far. I'm going to go back and I'm going to try and get that into a different space. So it can be a little tricky because obviously you're not working into stitches, you're working into, just into the edge there. So I think that will be fine. And then in your corner, you'll place 2 single crochets. Now you can work in your tail as you go, or you can just, weave it in later. And then you'll just place 1 single crochet in each of, so this is your chain edge, okay, and just make sure that you don't have too big a holes down that end. You probably will have little holes, but just make sure that they're not too big. So this is your chain edge. Okay, so you can see that they kind of look like stitches, but they're a little bit tighter, and that's because we worked into that third loop. So they're a little bit tighter than the stitches on this edge, but it makes the project look kind of symmetrical, the way that it will come out with this single crochet border. So you go ahead and finish your border. Now remember to place 2 single crochets in each corner stitches, and try and get, once you get over to this edge, try and get the same number of stitches as you've got here. Okay, and then just work all the way around, one single crochet in each stitch until you get back round to where you started. So I'll meet you back here. So I'm just at my other short edge here, and just to remind you, so I've placed my two stitches in that corner, and on my other side, so I've got my 2 stitches in each corner. I've actually only got 1 stitch in the corner on this side, but in between I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to try and get that same number. Well, I am going to get that same number in there. 1 and 2. You want those edges to be, pretty even. So I've got 4 in there, and then I'm going to work my 2 into that corner stitch. 1 and 2. And then I'll just start along this second long edge, and I'll meet you at the end. Okay, so I'm round at my last stitch, so I'm just going to place my single crochet in there, and now I'm going to offer you a way to finish off this round that will make it nice and neat, and it will basically just sew a stitch to finish. So once you've finished that edge, you'll just pull out your hook. So I haven't slip stitched, I haven't yarned over and pulled through. I'm just pulling out my yarn, and I'll just snip that end. So what you're going to do here is you're just going to thread your darning needle. Okay, so you've got your darning needle threaded, and we're just going to basically, like I said, sew a stitch. So locate your so that you've got your last stitch where this tail end's coming out of, and you've got your first stitch. Okay, so you're going to come underneath both loops of that first stitch, and then you're going to come down through the center of your last stitch. Come down into the back of the scarf. So you've basically just sewed a stitch, and you can't see where your project starts and ends. Okay, so just make sure that that stitch is approximately the same tension as the ones around it, and then you'll just weave into the back here. So just weave that tail end in, just down through some loops in the stitches, and then come back. Just don't go double back exactly where you've come through, just go alongside it, and make sure that your project isn't pulled tight by your tail. Snip off that tail end, and that's the second part of the scarf all done. So you can stop here. Okay, so if you want to just have this chunky look scarf without this scalloped edge, then you can just stop here, you know, or we're going to move on and create the edging like on this previous one. Okay, so what you'll do here is you need to count the number of stitches that you've got. So start in the corner here, so you know where you're starting, and count all of your stitches all the way around, and I'm going to go ahead and count mine, and I'll meet you once I've done that. Okay, so I've counted all of my stitches all the way around, and I've got 112 stitches. Okay, so you'll have no doubt a different number to mine. So what you've got to do here is do a few little calculations. Okay, so you've got to find out, so you're either going to divide that number into 5 or 7. Okay, now I've got 112 stitches, and if I divide that by 5, it gives me 22.4, and if I divide it by 7, it gives me 16. So you want the number, either 7 or 5, that is closest to a whole number when you divide it. You know, you divide your number of stitches by either 5 or 7. You want to go with the one that is closest to a whole number. Okay, it doesn't have to be exactly a whole number, but the closest to a whole number. Okay, and whichever one is closest to a whole number when you divide it, you know your number of stitches by either 5 or 7, whichever result is the closest to a whole number is the number that you choose. Okay, so for me, because I've got an exact whole number when I divide by 7, so I've got 16, I'm going to choose 7. Okay, and if yours is closer to 5, you know, when you divide by 5, it's closer to a whole number, then you will divide, 5 is your number. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, because it's a little bit tricky, because we need to sort of space these scallops as best we can. Okay, now, like I said, it doesn't matter if you haven't got an exact whole number, we can just adjust a little bit for that. So we're going to tie on at the back here. Okay, so it's in an area where it's not going to be seen, where if we have to make a little adjustment. So tie on. So how I tie on is I just insert my hook, place my yarn over top, and I pull up a loop. So you might have a different way of doing it. You know, you can slip stitch onto your hook, and you know, you can secure it in a different way. I just pull up a loop and then I chain one to secure it. And then I'll weave in that end later. Okay, so you'll chain an extra one. Okay, and then you're going to, so if your number is 5, you're going to skip 1 stitch. Okay, if your number is 7, you're going to skip 2 stitches. And then, so either skip 1 or skip 2 and place a double crochet in the next stitch. Now, if your number is 5, you're going to place 3 double crochets in this same stitch. So you've already placed 1, so you'll place 2 more. If your number is 7, you're going to place 3 more. Okay, so my number is 7, so I'm going to place 3 more in here. That's 3 and 4 total. Okay. Now, if your number is 5, you'll skip just 1. And then you'll slip stitch into the next stitch. If your number is 7, you'll skip 2 and then you'll slip stitch into the next stitch. Okay, so this is how it's going to go. So once again, if your number, so you'll just be repeating this. Okay, so whatever you've got here, you'll just be repeating it. Okay, so my number's 7, so I'm going to skip 2 and then I'm going to place a double crochet times 4 into that next stitch. If your number is 5, you'll skip 1 and place 3 double crochets in your next stitch. Okay, so we just have to make, and rather than right from the beginning trying to work out how many stitches we'll need, we're just making these little adjustments to our work here. Okay, so then I'm skipping 2 because my number's 7, and then I'll slip stitch. So I've got my 2 first scallops there. So basically what you're just going to do is repeat whatever you're doing, you know, whether your number is 5 or 7, just repeat whatever you're doing and work all the way around. Now I'm going to do my next couple and I'll meet you at the corner here because the corners are, you know, you'll just do the same thing, but you might have to adjust just depending on how you go. But you shouldn't have to, but I'll meet you when I get to the corner and we'll do a corner together. So continue on with either your 5 number scallop or your 7 number scallops, as I've just described. So I'm going to continue on and I'll meet you in a moment. Okay, so I'm at my corner now. Now, you might want to make just a little adjustment to the corner ones depending on how it's going. So I've just done my last slip stitch there, so I'm skipping 2 and I'm going to place my 4 half double crochets in the next stitch. 3 and 4. Now, I'm just going to check that. So you can see it's kind of, let's just slip stitch in my next one and let's just see how that's gone. But you can see how it's kind of pulling and misshaping around the corner there. So you don't really want that, okay? You want it to be able to sit flat. So what you can do, no matter whether your number is 5 or 7, you can just add an extra double crochet into your scallop and then see how that's going. And you can see already that's sitting much flatter. It goes around the corner much more nicely. Okay, so yeah, you can just adjust your scallop if you need to as you move around these corners. So just so they're not too tight. So I've skipped 2 and I think I'm going to do the same again because I'm moving around my corner. So I'm going to add 5 because my number's 7. I usually am doing 4. But I'm going to add an extra double crochet, so I'll have 5 double crochets in these corner ones. Okay, so you can just play around and adjust as you need to. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 more, 5, and then I'll slip stitch that next stitch, and I'll just make sure how that's looking. So you could even, you know, even if you wanted, you know, you could add 2 extra if it's, you know, if it's not working out for you. But that, look, that's sitting, you know, relatively flat for me. Actually, it is, you know, it's sitting flat for me. And then once I put my top part on, it's going to be fine anyway. So yeah. So you just make those little adjustments as you need to, and then you'll continue on. So I've slip stitched, skip 2, and then I just go back to my regular scallops. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And is it still, I think it's still going to be okay. Still sitting flat enough. And slip stitch. Okay, so yeah, so just make those little adjustments as you need to, and I'm going to continue on. I'm going to do a similar sort of idea at my other corner edges. So yeah, I'll meet you once I'm all the way around, and we might just have to make a little adjustment here if you haven't got a whole number. So I'll come back once I'm around at this other end. Okay, so I'm round at my other side here. Now this is where you might just have to make a little adjustment or 2. Okay, so depending how many stitches you've got left before you finish. So I've just done my slip stitch. So I've got 1, 2, 3 left before I'm back here. Ideally I would be able to do another scallop, but I'm not going to be able to, okay? So what I'm going to just do, now there's a few ways you can do this. You could just, because it's at the back and it doesn't matter too much, you could just go, you could skip 1 perhaps, skip 1 of my stitches. 1 and 2 and 3. I might just put 3, oh let's see, let's go 4 actually. I'll keep with my 4. And then I'm just going to slip stitch, so I'll skip that 1. And then I'll just slip stitch. So I've just, in that last scallop, I've only skipped 1 stitch on either side. So you can see it's still, you know, it's not out of place. You know, it still looks fine. Now, what you could do that for the last 2, depending on how many stitches you've got left. You could do that for your last 2 scallops. Because it's at the back here, it's not going to be super visible. So you've just kind of got to do whatever you need to do to, you know, make that work around this other side. Okay, like I said, you could go back to your previous scallop and just skip 1 on either side of the previous one as well. Okay, so yeah, just do what you can to make that work at the back there. Everyone's will be slightly different. And so I've slip stitched. I'm just going to slip stitch into my chain 1 there as well. Okay, so you've got your scallop finished as you can. Now I apologize again that it's not an exact number, otherwise we would have to work out an exact number right from the beginning, and it's just, you know, it gets too complicated. It's much easier, you know, just to adjust it here. Okay, so yeah, so just adjust it there as you can, and then you'll just yarn over and pull through. And if you've got any questions, please put them in the comments box below, you know, and I'll do my best to help you out with where you're at. So I've got mine there finished, and I'm just going to weave in my ends before we sew on a button. I might just, yeah, if I've got 2 ends together, what I tend to do is I tend to tie them together. So you can do that if you want to at the back there. And then I'll just weave in one of my ends. So, you know, you just weave in your end as you can in the back of your scarf. And I'm going to finish that off camera, and I'll see you shortly. Okay, so here's where we're at. Now all that's left to do here, so after I've sewed, you see you can't, you know, there's no obvious difference between those 2 scallops, you know. Okay, so hopefully you've worked that out for yourself. Now all that's left to do is to sew on our button. So what you can do is use your yarn if your yarn is appropriate, or if you've got this yarn that's got the different strands to it, you can just take a couple of strands from your yarn, which is what I'm going to do. Just unravel my yarn a little bit. And I'm going to use that. Now you can just use thread, or you can use whatever you like to use. So I'll just take a length of that yarn and you'll thread your needle. Now I'm hoping I'm going to be able to do that with this needle, but I might have to change to a smaller one. So you'll work out, so you can adjust slightly the sizing here. So what's a good idea to do is either just try it on your cat before you actually sew on your button, or you can make a measurement from the center of the buttonhole down to where you want to place the button. So I'm going to just place mine right, like sort of down near the base here. So just centrally at the base. And then I'll just sew on my button. Now I can either go crisscross, or I might go just between these two on this side. And then I'll sew the other side, the other half strand of my yarn. So you'll just sew on your button however you want to sew yours on. And I'll just finish this off camera and we'll come back and we'll sign off together. Okay, and then once you've got your button sewed on as you want it and where you want it to be, so sew it on nice and securely, just once again to avoid any potential choking hazard. So I'm just going to even up these tail ends. And I'm going to join two together, and I'm just going to tie a little knot at the back once again, just to add that little bit of extra security. And then I'll just weave in those tail ends. I'll just bring once again two together. So you go ahead, finish that off, and yeah, like I said, we'll come back and we'll sign off together. And there it is, your oversized chunky cat neck warmer. So I think this is super cute. I'm just a massive fan of a chunky look knit, so I love this one. So please send along your photos to catventurers.community@gmail.com, or you can tag us on social media at catventurous.crochet. So I would love to see how yours has turned out. So yeah, and of course meet your cat. So please do that if you have some time. And thanks very much for being here. Please like, share and subscribe to our channel, and we hope to see you soon. Thanks very much. Bye. Good job.